sometimes people ask a question: is this this world in front of us? That is our experience, and the reason why we are here is because is it some kind of test, some kind of examination? Do we have to learn some kind of lesson from it? And the answer is that's not really the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to reveal the divinity which is already in us. Swami Vivekananda's famous summary quotation, each soul is potentially divine, and the goal is to manifest this. We can add maybe sometimes from within. And so we can control nature and internal and external, he goes on to say. But having said that, as we go through a kind of journey through the timeline of what we call life, there are lessons that we would learn. And if we didn't learn them, then it seems that we wouldn't really grow. We have to take life not as a kind of tutor, but take the experiences as something valuable, which have potential opportunities inside them. There's an unusual way of thinking, not categorizing things into good or bad, not categorizing things into fortunate or unfortunate, but to see if there's some lesson. And is it true that every milestone that we have in the past has some kind of good value in it? And I would say from my own experience, yes. So there is a purpose of life, we understand that. That is a vision of God, if you want to use theistic language, or to access our own freedom, to discover our own already free state. And the Upanishads are full of this idea that actually our own individual self is the Atman. We take a summary of these Upanishads, sometimes abstract and obscure. We take the summary poem of the Bhagavad Gita, and there from the word go, to solve a crisis, we are told straight away, by the way, your nature is fully divine. It is called Atman. It is the real authentic self. It doesn't die because it was never born. It's not like anything else that we experience or observe. All around us, we can observe death and dying and birth and life. A kind of one thing on the one side, the other thing on the other side. If you do a mass balance of world population, there are statistics that tell us how many people die on the one side, how many people are born on the other side. And it varies, of course, from country to country, depending on the standard of living, the difficulties that people might experience. And that raises another question. Why are there any difficulties at all? Supposing we accept that there is a loving creator God that made this world, then why is it at all that we find any discrepancies or any inequalities? Some babies born in refugee camps, some babies born with AIDS, some people born in poverty. On the other hand, some people born with opportunistic wealth, some people born, as the saying goes, with a silver spoon in the mouth. But when you analyze this life, you will see that overall it is full of goodness. There's that biblical quotation, God made the world and saw that it was good. We have no right to see it bad. So why do we see it this way? It's because we are seeing it in a kind of small box. We're seeing it through the windows of 5 senses. It's a very narrow window. And the 5 senses are confined to a series of adventures that we might call a waking state. But our philosophy is very clear. This is not the only state of consciousness we have. When we study consciousness properly, then we will surely see very quickly that the waking state is only one drama, one aspect which we have. And there is more than that, much more than that. We have 3 states of consciousness. We can Imagine it like this, that some kind of state which gives us maybe a few problems and difficulties. But here's the thing. Supposing unasked, somebody gives me the opportunity of maybe several acres of land, let's say 7 acres of land. And then this land is an opportunity because we can create a garden for the welfare of everybody. May everybody come and enjoy the aesthetic value which is contained in a garden, but it's just a plot of land. Surely, if that is provided free of charge, somebody will provide a tractor, somebody will provide seed, somebody will provide agricultural expertise, somebody will plant some flowers. Something can be grown up. Somebody can supply some fencing to wall off the garden. Somebody will lay some paths. Now, if all that comes to me unasked, imagine now if I deliberately pull my resources of thoughts and sit and imagine the possibility of a garden for the benefit of everybody. Imagine the rose flowers and varieties of flowers that can be planted. Imagine the various seasons and how the garden will look in each season. What gardening techniques may be done in order to trim the flowers or even to help them to grow. What kind of manure we would lay out. And to see it in a complete state. And to see many people coming, enjoying the garden. Maybe some may sponsor it, bringing their friends. That garden now can be famous in the region where you are. It can go into the National Geographic or something like that, and people all over the world can come and visit. Supposing I form a picture like that, if unasked something came, then surely with this directed thought, something more can be made. We have a creative capacity within us to develop something and make it. Now, we cannot just say that this world is an apparitional world called Maya, and that has a relative reality, no doubt. But does it have any value? Of course it has a value, because within it contains this capacity to formulate some idea, some images, create some solid vision, create some solid imaginative world in great, great detail, in glorious technicolor, with the faith and confidence that thought is a suction and will draw things toward me. And what that means is, coming back to my statement, not really mine, the biblical statement, God made the world and saw that it was good. And we have no right to see it bad, but we can let the thought go loose. But one thing is for sure, thought is a suction. Coming from the unconscious level, it is a suction. And supposing all my ideas and so on, all my struggles and difficulties, all my rewards and joys are all gone, and some other state of consciousness comes along where my passport self goes away, then what will I find? I'll find a world of dreamy things where I'm the performer, as it were, seemingly divided into multiple scenes and people, places and events with endless time on my so-called hands. And supposing now that goes into a deep area, an area where consciousness and energy meet, then surely that would be the highest creative area I have. And supposing then I deliberately sit down in a kind of fourth state of consciousness called meditation and deliberately construct a picture, how will that affect the atmosphere around me? And will I use it in a selfless way for the overall common good? The possibility that I can. So my thought has a creative capacity within it, generally not used in this way, but it requires faith that some kind of energy is supplied to me free of charge. It flows to me. Within it is a creative capacity. When directed, it has its effect in this world. And we are thinking all the time. And so whatever opportunity we have in life is really something that we have self-created in many ways. We don't come as a blank. We come with some kind of experience. For example, if we take the body, well, there was a time when this body didn't exist. But we happen to know, by looking around, that life begins as a kind of embryo, and then something is fashioned and formed from it, and an individual comes out well-formed, and the mother's thought, no doubt, is the greatest direct contribution toward the development of the embryonic child. And so that is why during the pregnancy it is very useful to use this creative capacity, which has at its end success. What do we mean by success? A faith that all things are well and will be well, that nature knows what it's doing. Nature meaning the manifested power that we call God, the creator God, the sustaining God, the God that dissolves all our ignorance, the God that spins all the galaxies, the God that spins my small world called waking state, the God that ensures that the distance of the earth is the right distance from the life-giving sun, that whole solar system is in a Goldilocks position, as they call it, at the kind of suburbs of our galaxy, that it all spins round, that everything is working in great harmony, that invisible forces and energies are present in an electromagnetic wave system where life can easily travel through a kind of what we call an interspace and arrive at our eye. What a marvelous thing. Studying the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we get a glimpse of this cosmic marvel. And if we are not used to it, of course, we can get frightened by it. But the whole thing is working according to a certain designed will, a certain emanation from the highest power, the omniscience, the omnipotence, the omnipresence, what we generally call God. Will that God not arrange for us some gaps in life where goodness flows through? I was asked before the talk, will I be giving any examples of lessons of life from my own life? Well, I'll give you one. It's an economy class. So, when I was a young man, teenager, of course I was born at a very young age, but when I was in my teens, there was an incident that happened in my own life, and that is that my own mother passed away at a relatively young age for her, maybe 40-something. And so I happened to meet a very, very holy person who, when I explained my circumstances, said something that I repeat to others and something that was valid for me then and is valid for me now. That is, whenever there is a gap, something good always flows through it. If you're going to elaborate on that, you'll say that divine grace flows through, leaving no gaps wherever there's an opportunity, a gap, like water will find its way. You must know that when your plumbing system has a leak, you'll find somehow this water appears everywhere. It travels, you can't stop it. It finds a way. Even if an obstacle presents itself, you'll find a way around it. That's the nature of water. It has no definition. And so it can be taken, it can be channeled, no doubt, by human ingenuity, and we can steer it through pipelines. So grace is something like that. And grace means divine goodness, and it is flowing, and it's flowing all the time. So what we call lessons from life is just the identification of the presence of grace in our life. That means when we identify it by going back in our personal history, in our waking state, and finding these milestones, and we can divide the whole adventure of life into various subtitles. You can see that from infancy. There is a kind of adventure up to the age of, let us say, 9 or 10. And we can rate it by the changes that we make when we go to various schools, the kindergarten stage, the junior school stage, and the senior school stage, and so on, whatever your educational system was, and your tertiary education thereafter, and maybe taking an occupation thereafter, and maybe all the adventures that happen, let us say, over decades. You take each decade, and you'll see some important milestones that change the course of events. We can take the whole events with the kind of visual symbolism of water flowing, that water is flowing, and yet there's an obstacle that creates a new avenue, a new solution to a problem. Something could be a problem, and we find a solution to it. Something could be not recognized as a problem, but just a new direction presented. Something could be a quandary. An opportunity arises. We have to evaluate, will I take it? Will I leave it? And when you take it, you'll see something good happened. It's as if there's a divine helmsman behind everything, steering us in various directions. And when we go against it, when we go toward the red light, so to speak, we knock our head a little bit. That's a kind of a lesson. And we realize, we should go toward the green light. But never are we abandoned. This divine helmsman knows what he is doing. Recognizing this elevates the soul. So we know that there's a purpose in life. We also know that there's an individual purpose in life. And what we call learning or lessons is actually the acknowledgement of grace in our life. Unfolding, steering, directing. So that when we talk about success, we have to have the faith that nature, that is the manifested divine grace, and the author of it knows what we are doing, knows what it is doing. Having confidence in this, we're able to let go and release, like a child can let go, or like somebody floating nicely in the water, or knowing that even when we swim, there is a gap, a vacuum that we make by our movement that comes in and fills in the area where we are swimming, enabling us to glide forward. That kind of thing is there within us and giving us all kinds of lessons from life. And the tragedy is if we don't learn from the lessons. So we begin really by identifying what these life teachers are there, identifying the milestones which are there, and seeing the causal chain. The causal chain we often don't look at, but it's remarkable. We are living actually, in this sense, in a deterministic universe. And to make it spicy, we're given some doses of chaos. And yet the direction is certainly in a unidirectional way. We call that time. The arrow of time is an expression that modern science are using. So when we look at those milestones, we'll see they were all to our benefit. They were all to our good. From very early, I can identify milestones which change the direction of life, and looking back on it, see the causal chain. Now, we are witnessing the end of the causal chain so far. What is that? I'm sitting here, you're listening. Presumably you're listening anyway. In order to do that, then you have to have the instrumentation to do it. Don't think it's accidental that my voice, is being carried through a sensitive kind of vibrating thing in a microphone that is being carried along through the ethereal electromagnetic wave system, the invisible akasha, and it is being picked up through certain radio waves at your station, so that the broadcast and the reception is identical, hardly any noticeable time gap, and it's just identically delivered. We don't have to wait. We don't have to order the broadcast and then wait for 2 months. We get it instantaneously. And then there is the ear that catches it and vibrates with it, catches that kind of vibration, the kind of timpani, kind of internal drum, eardrum, that gets transported along a neurological system. It's identified in the brain, and all of this is happening in a split second. And we don't pause very often to wonder at the marvel of this. Modern technology has increased this marvel by giving us the technology, microphones, computers, reception areas, radio waves, the use of radio waves, etc. Even the use of microwaves. So you can heat your food by agitating molecules in the microwave part of the electromagnetic wave band. And it has that agitation of the molecules heats up your food or whatever. So when we look at this causal chain, if this didn't happen, this wouldn't happen. If that didn't happen, the other thing wouldn't happen. I'm sitting here, you're sitting here. I'm sitting here because I happen to be in Ireland. I happen to have been in Ireland for a number of years. I happen to be in Ireland because circumstances brought me here. I happen to have been nicely trained in Zimbabwe. I happen to have been living there with all the opportunities for service. Continuing that kind of attitude of service, I'm coming here. How is it that we met? Is it accidental? No. Your principle says there are no accidents. Even the psychologist Adler says there is always a causal chain, a deterministic thing. And so we take advantage of this causal chain and see it is part of the flow. It is to our advantage. And if we are able then to look at all of this through the eyes of a child with this wonderful, wonderful insight, even recalling when we were a child and how that looked and how we were fortunate at that point, then we will see that there is a kind of glory within it, an opportunity for an elevation of the soul, a sense of gratitude, because we are much, much better off than maybe than our preceding generation even. I was born in a post-war era. World War II having finished, I didn't have to go through all the difficulties that my own parents went through. In fact, the vast majority of people in the world went through. It was a world war that almost affected everybody. Now, there is no circumstance in modern times which is equivalent to it. Thank goodness. Not yet anyway, but there are local pockets of it. And there are incidents far removed from us that because they're far removed from us, we take as a distant thing and therefore of secondary, tertiary importance, sometimes not even important at all. We know of troubles all through the news media, but there are some troubles, for example, in Africa and other places where we have no idea about them. And yet, there are tragic things in people's lives there. And there is always a causal thing. That causal thing we call a law. It is the law of sowing and reaping. It is the law which we call karma, cause and effect. But underneath it all is a great stability. And within that stability, we have no idea that what we are looking at as a waking world of, let us say, nature, the sun, the moon, the natural resources of water and air, the trees, the flowers, and so on, that when we examine it carefully, those forms are shifted to more subtle ways of looking at it, until ultimately more and more subtlety being introduced. There we find that supreme, that infinite, that undivided, that unchanging entity, which was always there as a substratum, and that is spiritual direction. So in all religions, we have 4 types of people, really. And I suppose it is good to progress through those 4 stages. One is no interest in religion at all. That is, all 4 were brought up in a certain religious culture. No inclination toward it. Second type then will be noble people. People who are virtuous, people who are good people, and only partially employ this religion. Then there are others who are religious. They try to employ all the practical details of religious practice. For example, it is every Hindu's duty to give something toward the elements of life, called the glories of life, divine glories of life, called devas, something to the rishis, something to the other human beings, something to lower beings, that is animals, etc., even ants, and something to the ancestors, like that. And there are some who take that seriously, and there are some who don't. And those who take it seriously may not be fully engaged in it. Those who are fully engaged in it represent the 4th type. That is the spiritual type, who do see the Lord of the universe inside even an ant. Even the most difficult person you can come across, either on the world stage or in your own experienced environment. Capacity to penetrating vision and go and see that source where God dressed up sits there in full glory is the art we should all be cultivating. And how do we do that? We play the game within the scope of the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Wherever we find rajas and tamas, we put in sattva, a neutralizing sattva of truth and goodness and purity and love. In short, of complete selflessness, nobility untarnished. So it is quite important to have as a basis some religious family foundation. And when we go back, that is the first lesson that we have. And most people have it. There are some who are brought up in an atheistic religion. You might say, we didn't have any religion actually, but my father was this and my mother was that, but they didn't practice anything. Even so, the values of their religion come through, and they may well be noble people. And that has an influence. That would be a great lesson from life. And then how to take what we have, how to make it valuable. So understanding that grace is there as milestones, understanding there are no accidents, understanding that overall we are children of good fortune, understanding of these 4 progressive types of people, understanding that we're on a road, on a kind of journey toward our own inherent freedom, the kingdom of heaven that is within. So responding to the signals that we see in life, we establish what we find in the Bhagavad Gita as Swadharma, our own niche. Initially, of course, we can say Swadharma is to find out, broadly speaking, which category, which varna we are slotted into. What does that mean? The ancient people didn't see caste as a social distinction that ran into multitudes of divisions. They said for any society to operate well, 4 factors were required. First, there must be teachers, doctors, nurses, in other words, people who were dedicated, not interested in any salary. I recently read that some commentator picking up some conversations with Swami Vivekananda, was very, very adamant. He was addressing educators, and he was very adamant that educators should not be interested in money, should not be interested in any return. Obviously, people have to live, but that would be of very secondary importance. Primary importance is leading a dedicated life, tapping into the knowledge which is already there in students, the art of doing that, drawing this out. And there are specialist people who have the capacity to do that. So these would be dedicated people. These would be noble people. These would be the Brahmins. These would be people, and you might find in the same family people of different swadharma. And you can take that broad definition and drill it down and see, is this my role in life? And then there are others dedicated to the defense of the realm, so to speak. Those who are involved in administration, those who are involved in, let us say, even civil governance and so on. Those people who are there to protect those selfless people. Those people who actually are administrative saints. There are administrative saints and teacher saints. Janaka, for example, was an administrative saint, an administrative rishi. And then there are those people, the vast majority of people, who are contributing towards society through industry, commerce, and so on, like that. And then there are those people who are unskilled labor and don't think that they are inferior. There is a skill, even to bricklaying. There's a skill to physical work that people like so much. People voluntarily do it with a value that wants to shape a garden, for example, doing manual work and so on. They delight in that. But these are broad categories. And so we have to assess our skills and talents and see what is the lesson for us in life, how we can apply that for the good of others. When young people come to me and ask for, say, some career guidance, I don't know what to do with my life, my leaving certificate is coming up or something like that, after that university, I still have no idea. Then I devised a small form with certain questions. Above everything else, what are you most interested in? What do you think are your top skills and talents and abilities? What do you like to read more than anything else? What would your favorite topic of conversation be? And above all else, how will you use these skills and talents and abilities and interests, things that you like the most, for the benefit of others? That's the most important thing. That is the Swadharma. So it's there, designed for the good of everyone. It is to fit in everything. Bearing in mind the word dharma is derived from dhar, meaning the thing that holds things together, the thing that ties things up together. In other words, the thing that keeps things in a certain harmonious way. That is why it can be applied to religion, applied to law, applied to rhythm, applied to occupation, applied even to the details of religion. The word religion itself comes from two proposed origins. Religio, which means order, regulation, regularity, and the other origin will be relegere, to read again. The one has a deep spiritual implication, the other has a social implication. And so, how valuable is life? What is our contribution? And as we go through this adventure of life, more lessons come to us. Not only finding our own swadharma, but also understanding that as we advance, others retreat. In other words, as we have more free trips around the zodiac, we notice some missing in action. People disappearing. Where are they disappearing to? Well, one thing about it is life is change. And one great lesson is, unless we have we use the ability to shift our position with ease, to adapt, not to remain rigid, this is one of the most important lessons in life. After all, the whole of nature is doing it. If a tree is leaning in one direction, it's because it's saying, hey, where's my sunshine? I also require it. So I tell you what, you remain where you are. I'll lean over a little bit and then catch the sunlight, and then I can do my photosynthesis thing. The whole of life is adaptation. In fact, we might say it is one of the key factors, probably not emphasized enough, in the path of natural selection, in the Darwinian evolutionary scenario, that we adapt. Why we adapt is because we want to continue with the life. We don't want to end it. And in the sophisticated human way, we want to find out what is the meaning of life. This is an eternal question. What is the meaning of everything? And so we continue with life. Now, the other way is a little bit depressing. The other way is you get up in the morning, you do this, you have breakfast, you go to work, you have your lunch, you come back, you sleep, you repeat, and so it goes on. Most people want to break from that and determine, well, if we have enough money, we'll go on holiday, we'll make a break. And if you put it on a graph, you'll see how uneven that is. No regularity in life. There's no steadiness in your life, and steadiness is power. Take, for example, electricity, and Swami Vivekananda brings this up in his Raja Yoga. Electrons being directed in one direction, not scattered, produces electricity. Even that he mentions. So if we want to get fulfillment in life, our life has to have some regularity, not monotony. There's a big difference. So we'll see, if we're observant, the comings and goings and the necessity to adapt and to change. And my goodness, have we had to adapt. And speaking as, I'm not old, of course, I'm a senior citizen, having understood the enormous changes. When I was small, we didn't have telephones, not to mention mobile phones, that was out of the question. We didn't have a car, we didn't have a television, none of these modern conveniences that are around. There was a radio, that's it. And I think that childhood there was a wonderful, adventurous, sporting experience, a childhood of joy. There is a book that somebody highlighted to me, and I can't offhand remember the title of the book, but it is entitled something like the crisis, or if I haven't got the title correct, forgive me, but it was talking about the crisis of modern youth, how they are so engaged in gadgets, cell phones, etc. So that this now changes the wiring, the neurological wiring in the brain. And so the creative side of the brain is being overridden by a kind of new wiring that is only responding to technology. That's the kind of purport of the book, and warns of the danger of a society like this. So growing up, what will be the lesson? I have to take the modern necessity for gadgets, which are time-saving, mobile phones and so on, and see how I can use them usefully and where there are obstacles, where they take my attention away, and use them in a facility way rather than in a slave way. Being a slavery to modern technology is the great danger. But we have to adapt, and evolution is all about adaptation. You take a whole body of bacteria, for example, and change their very, very precise parameters, and very quickly they will adapt. A microbiologist told me once, the greatest difficulty is killing bacteria. They go into dormancy, and when they come alive again, come out of their so-called hibernation, in other words, when parameters change, internally in the body, of course, it's called disease. We have useful bacteria, and when the useful bacteria are no longer as healthy as they should be, then the pathogenic bacteria have a field day, and we say, oh, there's something called a bacterial infection. We can see through the COVID how a tiny organism, such as a virus, can very cleverly adapt, continuously adapt. What's behind it? Survival is behind it. And so we have to adopt, we have to adapt, we have to improve. This is a great lesson in life. We have to be plastic. We have to be flexible. And in that flexibility is not just about survival. That flexibility is about changing to our advantage, seeing a new opportunity, replacing the idea of an obstacle or problem with the idea, no, it's actually an opportunity. With this knowledge that things are good intrinsically, there is a divine helmsman behind everything, which presents us with opportunities that I call green lights. And hard work is necessary along with that. And then after that, what we might call karma bhakti, the additional sweet benefit that I understand that all actions can be offered to this divine helmsman. That is the key to all success. So we have to work with the passage of time that holds within it birth, life, and death. And as we progress, we will see, as we get older, that is, in years, we will see birth, we will see life, and yes, we will see death. And death, we are mourning the life of a prominent religious leader, religious figure, Pope Francis. But that's a reality. The reality is we're all headed for that. We're all headed for a temporary semicolon, because our system is absolutely certain that death is not the end. Even if you don't believe in anything religious, spiritual, so on and so forth, the data from near-death experiences is overwhelming that there is a light, as it were, at the end of the tunnel. It is not the end. It is simply the body is worn out, or the body is no longer with us. And so the adventure continues. And we know, the rishis tell us, that there are several directions we can be headed to. We can be headed toward freedom in this life. We can be headed toward a return to this life to fulfill or to complete the journey. Or we can go into a kind of realm of the divine that ultimately gives us a freedom. Or we can go into the world of ancestors, where we maybe meet our beloved ones, spend our merit, and return as continuing pilgrims on our journey. Or it can go downwards. We can spiral downwards to other species, etc., because not everybody is at heart as good as the majority of people anyway. There are no bad people, only bad behaviors. We have to be sure about that. And so we have to shape our life in such a way that it is something which is useful. And we do that based on the lessons of life that we have learned. There are other lessons that are contained from Scripture. And we look at that, but the very fact that we have access to Scripture is itself a wonderful, wonderful evidence of manifesting grace for us. In the Viveka Sudamani, we are told by Shankaracharya, presumably the author, that a human birth is a very rare thing to get. We shouldn't waste it. In fact, not getting this realization of the truth of the ultimate truth of our own freedom in this life is almost equivalent to suicide, because that's a wasted life. Now, we might be depressed by that point of view, but we should be encouraged that we all have the possibility to do it. Don't ask how long it will take. Don't peep out of the window for a result. You'll be delayed by this. Take for granted the fact that the fullness of freedom is already here with you, present, right here, right now, in all perfection. And we just have to uncover it. And the whole of spiritual endeavor is the uncovering process. How do we do it? We do it through pranayama, that is controlling energy. We do it that is for the physical. We do it by prayer and meditation and japa, the silent mental repetition of a mantra, and meditating on its meaning. We do it, in short, by purifying body and mind. And so in doing that, we then come to this clarity that results in what we call revelation. It's not something new or something that comes to us. It is already there, just as the sun is already there, whether the clouds are in front or whether they move on. And our cloud of unknowing or ignorance should move on by our self-effort. Scripture tells us that this body is in fact something like a city of God. We consider it that way, our valuation of it changes. It is necessary to approach the goal step by step, and Scripture provides us with this, starting off with a duality. You might find so many different contradictions in Scripture. They're not really. It's just good teachers say, you take a little bit here, and you take more the next time, progressive kind of revelation, taking you by the hand, and carefully guiding you through the forest of life, and at each step learning the lessons. We learn that in this world only the wise should wield power. The rest is dangerous. We learn that the conduct of the wise is an example to us, giving us the possibility to follow in their footsteps. We learn that people are different and will take different paths, but all are progressing in the stream of life toward freedom. We learn that it is not good to approach anybody in resentment or anger. We have to learn the lesson of life that silence in many cases is the best response. And standing our ground is another type of response. But in any case, no poison, no toxicity should go with it. No resentment should go with it. No anger should go with it. Anger, desire, passion of that kind, fear, doubt, these are all our enemies. And we have to conquer all of them. We have to learn from life's lesson about how to practically overcome these obstacles and get around them, knowing that we are equipped for them. And our adventures in life tell us how to do this. I have, in my own life, since you asked, experienced some wonderful adventures and had to adapt and had to rely on the grace that I knew was there, and had to, from a very early age, I had the advantage of the solid philosophy of Vedanta that sees things differently, sees things as a drama and a play, and all the actors will not intimidate me. And so, if you have an adventurous spirit, take whatever is there in front of you that was originally fearful and remove the fear by a different insight and move toward it, not go away from it. And see what happens. You just dissolve. Take everything you have and with great courage, move toward it with this absolute conviction. It is only God standing there. There are no two. So make life your adventure. If I were to tell you anything of a personal nature where I learned lesson in life, it is to be completely fearless. With this understanding, there is only one without a second, standing there with you, around you. It is part of the drama of life. No harm will ever befall you. And those who try to attack you, they will suffer their own consequence. I shouldn't bother too much about it. Life is not a competitive spirituality. There's no such thing as competitive meditation. So these are some thoughts in relation to lessons of life. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, 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 peace unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Oh.